You know, we always think of wars starting with a big explosion, right? A sudden attack. But what if that's all wrong? What if the really big conflicts, what if they're engineered step by step, long before anyone even picks up a weapon?
So check this out. Not too long ago, Turkey's foreign minister said something that just stops you in your tracks. Now look, you could just dismiss it as, typical political talk, but what if it's more? What if he was actually pulling back the curtain on the next chapter before it's even been written?
Okay, so let's really dig into this. We're going to break down this incredible analysis that calls this whole thing a playbook. Think of it like a recipe, a 7-step guide for manufacturing an enemy. And here's the part that'll give you chills. According to this analysis, when it comes to Turkey, 5 of those 7 steps, they're already done. But wait, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the playbook, we got to ask the big question: why? Why would a playbook like this even exist? Because the theory here is that this isn't just happening by chance. It's structural. It's literally built into the DNA of Israel's security system.
Yeah, think about it. Since day one, Israel's survival has been tied to this one core idea: making sure no one in the neighborhood gets stronger. So the security doctrine, it's not just about reacting to threats. The argument is it actually needs them to exist. I mean, if you have no enemy, what happens? The whole system that keeps you on top, it starts to crumble.
And this is where it gets really interesting. It creates this kind of perpetual motion machine. The US sends billions in military aid, right? And the justification is always this narrative of a constant, looming threat. That money then has to be spent on weapons from American companies who, surprise, surprise, lobby Congress to keep that aid flowing. And the one thing that keeps this entire engine running? You guessed it, an enemy.
There's actually a pretty chilling term that analysts use for this whole strategy. They call it mowing the lawn. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You don't pull out the weeds for good. Nope. You just cut the grass down, wait for it to grow back, and then you mow it again, and again, and again. It's a way to make sure you always have a reason to start the mower. And that lawn of conflict, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Okay, so that's the why. Now, let's get to the how. We're about to lay out the 7 steps of this playbook. And I want to be clear, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's a pattern that has been observed before. And once you see how it lines up with what's happening with Turkey, well, it's pretty tough to unsee.
All right, here we go. The whole 7-step shebang. First, you name the enemy. Then, you build the story around them. You squeeze them economically. You surround them with alliances. You find a place to fight them indirectly, a proxy battlefield. You break whatever is protecting them, and then, and only then, comes the war. Let's break down how this works. Step 1, name your enemy. Simple, right? With Iran, this was a slow burn, took decades of saying it over and over again. But with Turkey, wow, Naftali Bennett, a guy who was and probably will be Prime Minister of Israel again, just came right out and said it. Turkey is the new Iran. That's not a slip of the tongue, folks. That's step 1, happening right out in the open. Next up, step 2, build the narrative. So for Iran, you had all these powerful think tanks just churning out report after report, shaping this global image of them as a massive threat. Well, guess what? The source material for this explainer points out that the very same institutions are now pivoting. They're publishing papers questioning Turkey, its alliances, its goals. The narrative machine has been turned on and it's pointing in a new direction.
All right, step 3, economic pressure. We all saw what that looked like for Iran, crushing sanctions that crippled their economy. Now with Turkey, it's a two-way street, and it's happening fast. Turkey hit Israel with a total trade embargo. And what happened next? Key figures in Israel started saying, hey, maybe Turkey shouldn't be in NATO anymore. The squeeze is on.
Okay, step 4, encircle them with alliances. Remember the Abraham Accords? That was all about isolating Iran? Now look at Turkey. Benjamin Netanyahu himself has talked about a hexagon of alliances, teaming up with places like Greece, Cyprus, India, all countries that have their own friction with Turkey. It's a classic strategy. Build offensive friends around your new enemy.
Step 5 is a big one. Set up a proxy battlefield. For a decade, Syria was basically the arena where Israel and Iran fought without fighting directly. And wouldn't you know it, Syria is the stage again. You've got Turkish influence in the north and Israeli influence growing in the south. This is no accident. It's like setting up the pieces on a chessboard for a collision you know is coming.
So let's just pause for a second. Let that sink in. 5 steps. Done. Check, 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 check. Step 6, that's breaking the target's protective shield. That's happening right now. The gears are turning as we speak. This playbook is almost finished. There's only one step left. But, and this is a huge but, here's where things get really, really dangerous. This playbook, it was basically designed to work on a country like Iran, a country that was already pretty isolated. Turkey is a whole different ballgame. It is not Iran, and that makes this incredibly risky.
And I mean, the difference is just staggering. You look at any metric that matters, military, economy, leadership, who their friends are, and Turkey is playing in a completely different league. Trying to run the final step of this playbook on them, well, that could unleash something nobody is prepared for.
Let's just talk military for a second. Turkey has the second biggest army in all of NATO. This isn't some force that's been worn down by sanctions. We're talking about a modern, professional, battle-hardened military. Their drone technology alone has literally changed the way wars are fought. This is a serious power.
And it's not just about the army. Their economy is G20 level, tied directly into Europe. Their leader isn't known for making empty threats. They've got a strategic partnership with Pakistan, which, by the way, has nuclear weapons. And get this, their top diplomat used to be their top spy. He knows exactly what this playbook looks like from the inside. This playbook is up against something it has never, ever faced before.
So, okay, you see the pattern, you see the massive complication. Now we can stop looking at what has happened and start thinking about what's going to happen. And based on this exact framework, the analysis we've been walking through makes 3 very specific, very bold predictions.
Prediction number 1. Before the big NATO summit, watch for a massive diplomatic firestorm between Israel and Turkey. And this won't be some quiet disagreement behind closed doors. We're talking public, loud, and designed to make the entire NATO alliance extremely uncomfortable.
Number 2, sometime in the next 6 months, look for a strike in Syria. It'll be on something connected to Turkey, but it'll be deniable, subtle. The point isn't to start a war. Not yet. It's a test. A poke to see how Turkey reacts, to see how far they're willing to push back. It's a classic move before the final step.
And here's the last one, and honestly, it's the most important. The prediction is that this playbook, it's probably going to fail against a target like Turkey. But here's the critical part. Failure doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. Oh no. It means chaos. The kind of chaos that could crack NATO wide open, speed up America's exit from the Middle East, and completely redraw the map of power in the region.
And that really brings us to the heart of the danger, which is just perfectly summed up by this quote from the source material. Look, this playbook is a system. It worked fine when it was pointed at an isolated country like Iran. But what happens when you point that same automated system at something it wasn't built to handle? What happens when it's on a collision course with a powerhouse?
So, as we watch all of this play out, the real question isn't who's going to win, it's what else breaks along the way. What are the unintended consequences? Because if this system just keeps running on autopilot, it might not just break one country or another, it might break the whole international system, and the clock is ticking.